Encodya, developed by Chaosmonger Studio and published by Assemble Entertainment, is a strange hybrid of anachronistic point-and-click gameplay with an engaging story and atmospheric presentation. At any moment, you can find yourself easily immersed in its detailed world before that sensation is destroyed by yet another frustrating puzzle that requires an exact sequence of steps to make any progress. Encodya is set in Neo-Berlin in the year 2062. The player alternates control between Tina, a 9-year-old orphan, and her loyal robot companion, Sam 53. It's a future in which corporations run urban centers by backing corrupt bureaucrats only interested in self-enrichment. As automation and increasingly complex robots have drastically reduced the need for a human workforce, many are now cyber junkies. They deal with the poverty and a lack of purpose by spending their lives in a corporate-sponsored VR world, living out fantasies in cyberspace. As far as near-future narratives go, it's a great setup and provides an excuse to travel through several key locations within the city and into a more diverse cyberspace setting. Although some of the narrative beats feel cliched and the story wholesome, Encodya can still feel tonally inconsistent. It often highlights the depressing and lonely situation many citizens find themselves in, but also plays on Tina's youthful exuberance and hopefulness. This would be great if it were not for several attempts at injecting fourth-wall-breaking humor, most of which feels forced or falls flat. As a result, the overarching narrative is still one of Encodya's strong points, but you'll need to endure some cringe-worthy dialogue. Encodya quickly gets you up to speed with the state of the world and the basic gameplay loop during a lengthy prologue and opening chapter. You'll swiftly discover that despite Encodya's modern flourishes, it remains a point-and-click adventure rooted in the past. You talk to NPCs for information and quests, you hunt for interactable objects and key items, you combine and use these newly fashioned objects to solve puzzles, and, hopefully, make some narrative progress. It's a tried and tested formula that has slowly evolved to make the genre more accessible. However, even when you consider the hint systems offered by Encodya, this game still feels far from accessible. In theory, the game caters for everyone and offers two difficulties from the get-go. One that allows players to highlight objects on the ground and ask Sam 53 for puzzle hints, and another that removes these elements, some environmental clues, and adds an extra step to some puzzles. On console, there's also the added bonus of pixel hunting being drastically reduced, as interactable objects and key items are highlighted as you move a character close, even if this gives away several secret interactions. As a result, it's much easier to identify important objects and key items quickly. However, even with these advantages to playing on console, there are still two major issues that remain unchanged from the PC release: the inflexible puzzle solutions and lots of backtracking. You see, puzzles in Encodya only have one correct solution, which requires an exact sequence of events, think observations, dialogue triggers, or combination order of items, and it allows for no substitutions, no matter how logical they may seem. This is something you'll experience with the first major puzzle sequence in the prologue, and pretty much the entirety of the first chapter. As a result, it can feel increasingly tiring to start each chapter, running around, systematically hunting for key items and interactable objects. Should you encounter dialogue with a character that has multiple options, you'll need to exhaust all lines of investigation, just through systematic repetition, until you unlock a clue or receive a key item. With a rough idea of what you need, and an idea of how to solve the puzzle, you attempt to combine several items into something useful, shuffle around the sequence of your interactions, and finally figure out what the developers wanted from you. Of course, this often means a lot of backtracking, and the fast travel map only takes you to the central point of any key location. There's also an RNG system in place for several codes, but these changes never actually alter the sequence of events you need to take to solve a puzzle. Strangely, the puzzle logic and number of steps required actually feels more streamlined as you progress, but this doesn't stop the core gameplay loop from feeling dated and disrespectful of your time. If you use it, the hint system is a good way to figure out what items you need, and some potential actions you need to take, but you'll still need to thrash out the correct sequence. Another disappointing element is the limited feedback from failed attempts at combining items or manipulating an object. There's no humorous quip, and only rare locations will actually hint at the right approach, and again, strangely, these seemed more common the further I progressed. More often than not, you'll just hear generic quips like, "not working," or "nah," from Tina, or "that's incorrect," or "wrong," from Sam 53. Now, to Encodya's credit, I chose to push on, and slowly grew to understand the underlying and rigid puzzle design. Despite several frustrating sequences, the intriguing narrative and immersive presentation proved a strong hook. Encodya's 2.5D world manages to feel remarkably alive, thanks to the cartoonish but detailed art design, ambient audio, shifting time of day, weather effects, and a moody soundtrack that honestly wouldn't feel out of place in Blade Runner. All these elements come together to create an unexpectedly atmospheric game. Now, despite several missteps, the bulk of the voice work is also sharp, charming, and heartfelt. The world may feel cold, but the characters you encounter are usually warm. The transition from a mouse-driven point-and-click adventure to a gamepad-driven one is a double-edged sword. As mentioned before, the reduction in pixel hunting is a big plus, but the control scheme can feel janky when you need to move Tina or Sam 53, and what looks like a walkable area often feels inconsistent. You'll often find yourself having to jiggle around the character to highlight the right interaction when they're closely spaced, slowly drag objects from the inventory to a location in the world, and deal with strange area transitions, some of which just activate on proximity, while others require you wriggle around and find the prompt. Overall, it works fine given the slow and methodical genre, but there are issues. Encodya on console leaves me feeling just as conflicted as the PC version. The anachronistic and frustrating puzzle solving, coupled with plenty of backtracking, can completely break the flow of the narrative and pull you out of the world. On the other hand, when you grasp the logic of a puzzle and you're making steady progress, the immersive setting, quirky characters, and engaging story make for a nostalgic point-and-click experience. I think Encodya is still best suited for players who grew up on 90s point-and-click adventure games, those who are more willing to forgive the dated elements and focus on the positives. Despite falling into that category myself, I worry Encodya will offer too many roadblocks for many people to enjoy.